Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 post-apocalyptic currencies that are more valuable than gold. Number 10. Candles.
Currencies need portability. You can carry them with you. Scalability, different values to facilitate trading in varying quantities or goods. Durability, so they can actually change hands. And once society is thrown into chaos and all sense of order, infrastructure and governance is reduced from space-age efficiency to primal tribalism, utility. That is, we won't be wasting time with portraits of dead royalty or shiny rocks. Money will be something that everyone needs. So when our ability to generate heat and light with the flip of a switch gets undermined, the demand for candles is going to go up and stay up, making them a solid option for conducting trade. Candles as currency will run from your basic wax and string candle to the more sophisticated oil-burning lantern. Given humanity's innate fear of the dark, you can bet that candle makers will be more popular among the bedraggled survivors of society's collapse than prospectors and bankers. Candle making has long been a favorite hobby of survivalists and DIY off-the-grid preppers for good reason. Taking care of the basics in a survival situation means candles, not gold, are the go-to commodity.
Number 9. Shoes.
When all other currencies collapse, you can bet good quality shoes will hold their value. Shoes have a bit more robust utility even than candles, as they perform not just a variety of basic functions, but can carry some amount of status too. Nothing says, "I survived the big one," better than wearing your valuables around like it's still ancient Rome. Conspicuous consumption may be tempered by volatile economic forces, but the deep-seated drive to buy status symbols tends to be strongest among the worst off. Paradoxically, that could well mean that survivors of a global disaster would have an appetite for shoes that make a statement. And of course, no pilgrimage to the rumored safe place that somehow made it through the storm unharmed could make it far without some resilient footwear. Whether escaping, working, or curb-stomping the infected hordes one skull at a time, shoes are a guaranteed must-have commodity for the apocalypse, and they can quickly convert to food in your belly or a blanket on your shoulders.
Number 8. Children.
Listen, nobody is condoning slavery here, but it isn't exactly without precedent. Ever heard of a bride price? Basically, babies have a price and expected value, and losing a baby maker, i.e. a female family member, carries an opportunity cost that grooms and their families are expected to offset. And this is a pre-apocalyptic practice. Even without throwing death and destruction into the mix, everyone from China to Japan to England, circa children of men, can attest youth is a finite resource for which there are no substitutes. This makes children precious, tradable, and perfectly viable as a currency substitute.
Number 7. Books.
The whole reason the printing press was so revolutionary was because it made knowledge available to the masses and it required almost no infrastructure. Compare that to the integrated systems of electricity generation, server farms with their own requisite need for adequate climate-controlling infrastructure, mobile devices with hardware and integrated support for various access platforms, coders and programmers, and the whole host of raw and process materials needed to make digital data storage viable. Any number of things could disrupt the infrastructure necessary to make magnetic data storage go kaput, and suddenly those old archaic paper warehouses known as libraries will be veritable treasure troves of invaluable information. If you believe the end is nigh, don't fill all the shelf space in your fallout shelter with canned food, stock a bookcase or two, and just see if you don't find your encyclopedic knowledge of such arcane subjects as first aid and growing food makes you uncommonly popular and wealthy.
Number 6. Alcohol.
Depending on the quantity, alcohol nutrient content ratios, purity, and other such variables, this one stands to serve a whole bevy of economic purposes. There is no question that people will work for booze. Heck, if it was good enough for the pyramids, it is good enough for the postmodern apocalypse. Alcohol, it turns out, has been a popular alternative to currency just about as long as people have known how to make it. And just as with the best sorts of luxury commodities, alcohol can be crafted into a whole spectrum of different varieties of wide-ranging strengths, quality, and exclusivity. When something is functional at a basic level, yet can be refined enough to convey status and wealth, you know you are on the right track to replace gold as a currency. Leaving aside the mind-altering properties of alcohol, it may be worth bearing in mind that it makes a fine disinfectant and sedative, ensuring that even teetotalers will be willing to shell out some eggs and jerky in exchange for a bottle or two.
Number 5. Knives.
Knives are useful, convenient, fashionable, and sure to be in universal demand, all the hallmarks of a great post-apocalyptic currency. A lot of survivalists and zombie movie fans might insist guns and bullets make more sense than knives, but as the Mythbusters proved, you can't very easily shoot down a tree with guns, much less carve up a chicken for dinner. If we accept for a moment that post-apocalyptic trade is actually going to take place and that life isn't just an endless shoot-'em-up race across a charred desert landscape, lives actually come out on top as a viable means of exchange.
Number 4. Seeds.
Mad Max Fury Road got it right. You can have all the guns, bullets, flame-throwing guitars, vehicles, oil, and childbearing women you can lock in a mountain vault, but seeds will still be a game-changing ingredient. The world has grown accustomed to a supply chain that takes food and turns it into value-added processed snacks that have all but bankrupted traditional family farms, turning over the global production of edibles to a shrinking number of massive corporations. When the systems that make money more than just scribble on pieces of paper dissolve, so will our ability to get avocados in Calgary all year round. The value of human labor will skyrocket, in part because so much of it will be needed to keep farms operating and churning out seasonally determined, locally grown, non-refrigerated produce. At the heart of this whole system are the little powerhouses of life we plant in the ground to turn into food: seeds. Those who manage to preserve non-GMO seeds that grow plants actually capable of producing their own non-proprietary seeds will be carrying around pockets full of, well, gold, but better.
Number 3. Honey.
And by extension, honeybees. In combination with the aforementioned seeds, bees become an integral part of the agricultural system that sadly hasn't thrived under pre-apocalyptic conditions. But outside the bees themselves, honey is an incredibly versatile, functional, non-synthetic substance with a myriad of applications. From antiseptic properties and other healthcare uses to its value as a dietary supplement, honey has much to recommend it. Taken together, honey and honeybees play an integral part in enabling humans to survive in a world without the modern means of production of medical care. Portability and scalability are easily achieved, if not inherent, and the ubiquity of need and value make it a solid option for universal trade.
Number 2. Sugar.
In many ways, sugar was the very foundation of the New World, aka the driving force behind colonization of the Western Hemisphere. Classic US imagery tends to dwell on tobacco fields and especially cotton plantations as the settings for American slavery, but in reality it was sugarcane that drove the greatest demand for enslavement and forced labor. One of humanity's favorite drugs, sugar is equal parts natural resource and tradable commodity. If the social order governing the societies of the world were blown up by forces or events unknown, there's no way our appetite for/addiction to sugar would disappear. The means of production responsible to produce sugar actually make it remarkably similar to gold. The supply is limited, in part by the sheer difficulty in getting appreciable quantities of it, and in a form that makes it practical to use for trade. Of course, while the supply of gold is finite, sugar in theory could continue to scale along with the redevelopment of the economy, making it as durable as it is practical as a means of conducting trade. This is actually one of the leading arguments against using gold as a currency. The cost involved in its extraction routinely exceeds the value of any gold extracted. Sugar production is difficult, but it can also be done in a sustainable system rather than an earth-depleting mining operation.
Number 1. Salt.
Salt is literally the original currency. Consider the word salary and you start to get the picture of just how foundational salt is as a store of value and wealth. The lives of humans, the fates of empires, and the seasoning of meats the world over have hinged on the production and distribution of salt for centuries. So the smart money says that a piddling world-ending apocalypse won't get in the way of salt's domination of all life on Earth. Unlike many other items on this list, salt is not just a luxury, a status symbol, or any sort of other nice-to-have, even though it has at various times been all of those things. Salt is used to preserve other foods, making it the next best thing to refrigeration in a world without an electrical grid or, free-on circulation systems. Salt trumps gold on every other measure of what makes a currency valuable, and in the event of the big one, it may be your ticket to wealth, prosperity, and survival.
So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a like below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos just like this 7 days of the week. Over there on the right are a couple of examples of our other videos. One is the top 10 planets that could potentially sustain life, and below that we've got the top 10 dangerous countries with nuclear ambitions. So be sure to check both of those out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.